Hey guys, this is our fifth web-based lecture. This is the only web-based lecture that you will have for this week, which is week 4. Today is limbs 5 through 8, or the higher order thinking limbs. Per usual, I'm going to do a quick and dirty review, especially just because we've had a little bit of a break since we've done a web-based lecture. So just to make sure that, again, we're all on the same page. I'm going to talk a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it will become clear as I go through that discussion why I did that. At least I hope it will. And then we're going to talk about what do I mean when I say higher order thinking? What exactly does that entail? And in specific to those 4 last limbs that we have to go. Limb 5, Prada Yahara. Limb 6 and 7, which I sort of lumped together a little bit. Again, I'll explain why. And then limb 8, Samadhi or enlightenment. And then I'll give you guys your homework for the week. So, pyramid of goodness, once again. Remember, yamas, social restraints, niyamas, individual observances. Those are at the bottom of our pyramid. We need to be taking care of those before we even attempt any sort of physical or mental practice. Asana, which is limb 3, our postures. Pranayama, which are limb 4, that's our breath control. That's our physical practice of yoga. And then, again, today's info, we're covering those last 4 limbs, the higher order thinking limbs. That's where we see the transition from the physical to the mental. We also sometimes get a transition into the spiritual. We don't necessarily have to, but sometimes it's there. And for me, this is where yoga gets hard. The yamas and the niyamas are things that once you get used to them and paying attention, shouldn't be any sweat. I think the physical practice, and that's because I'm an exerciser, I don't really have an issue with either. But when you start talking about meditation and calming and quieting your mind and things like that, that's where things can get hard. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At this point, you guys are probably asking, why do I keep showing you the 8 limbs of yoga set up in a pyramid? Maslow is one of the reasons why. If you guys have had Psych 100 before, or if you're currently taking Psych 100 this semester, Maslow will either sound familiar or you are going to see him again. Abraham Maslow is a psychologist, and he is famous for describing a pattern of motivation in terms of human development. And what that means is he basically described that there were these challenges that each one of us as human beings had to resolve before we could move on to the next one, and before we could sort of become self-actualized, become better people, stronger people. So hopefully at this point that is starting to actually sound a little bit familiar with some of the things that I've been talking about for 3 weeks now. And if it doesn't, hopefully this slide will clear things up for you guys. So on the left-hand column of this slide, this is the information that is particular to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On the right-hand column of this slide, I have put the analogous information that we've talked about as it regards the 8 limbs of yoga. Okay? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom levels of his pyramid he described as deficiency needs. And those are the needs that we all must meet just basically to survive. Okay? Obviously, just like the pyramid that I've presented to you guys with the 8 limbs, the lower down on the pyramid, the bigger that step is, the more important it is that those issues are resolved before you move up to the next level and try and attempt those challenges. Okay? So the very bottom level of Maslow's pyramid are physiological needs. And basically that means you're going to die if you don't meet these. These are things like food, water, air, shelter, stuff like that. I mean, literally basic human needs. Okay? His next level are safety needs. Safety needs, he sort of categorizes in a number of different ways. There's personal, so that would be, safety of your physical person from things like war or natural disaster. There's health needs, and that would be safety of your physical self from things like domestic abuse. So when we talk about health in this case, we mean things that you as a person don't have control over, something that's happening to you. And then safety from economic issues, so for us that would mean things like job security. His third level, he calls love and belonging needs. So this would be resolving things like family relationships, friendships, significant others, having those things in your life so that you have a support system. Those things are important because if you don't have them, again, you can't make that step up to that next level. His fourth level he calls esteem needs. Esteem needs would be both self-esteem and self-respect. Self-esteem would be the respect that you get from others. So when you call mom and dad and you're like, hey, I got an A on my yoga presentation today. And they're like, that's awesome. That would be self-esteem. And then self-respect would be respect that you have for your own self. So again, looking over into the right-hand column, I want you to see that these actually do sort of line up with the first 4 limbs of yoga. Limb 1, the yamas, those social restraints, can really be thought of as meeting physiological needs or helping others meet their physiological needs. Okay? Maslow's safety level can be thought of as limb 2, our knee yamas. Okay? We want to keep ourselves safe and we want to make sure that we're doing things to protect ourselves. And that's what the knee yamas are, those individual observances. Limb 3, asana, can really be thought of as love and belonging in terms of Maslow. You've got these postures that are common to any and every practice of yoga. And what's common to all of us? We all need family. We all need friends to be there to support us. And then limb 4, breath control, can really be thought of as esteem. Remember, we've talked about breath control as life force, bringing good in and getting rid of waste and bad. That's what self-esteem is allowing good to come in for you and maybe pruning away some of the things that you don't need. So how does that fit in with higher order thinking? Again, on this slide, the left-hand side is pertaining to Maslow and psychology. The right-hand side is pertaining to the 8 limbs of yoga. So in terms of Maslow, his tip of the pyramid is self-actualization, and he describes that as an individual's ability to recognize their full potential. So what a person can be, a person should be. And again, you need to master the levels leading up to self-actualization, all those deficiency needs, the physiological, the safety, the love and belonging, and the esteem, before you attempt to realize your full potential. Maslow will estimate 1 out of every 100 people or so will actually become self-actualized. And he says that this is because society rewards things like achieving love or achieving esteem more than it rewards becoming your true self. Okay? So from a yoga standpoint, limbs 5 through 8 represent the move from meeting those physiological and physical needs. Again, that physiological, that safety, that love and belonging, and the esteem, towards meeting the mental and potentially spiritual needs that the self has. We can think of limb 8 as kind of self-actualization as Maslow would define it. Limb 8 occurs when an individual recognizes their full potential. Okay? And again, same thing as with Maslow. You need to master those bottom tier levels. You need to resolve those conflicts before you take that next step up that pyramid. Okay? I'm hoping that this sort of is making a little bit of sense to you guys. I think that the 8 limbs of yoga are a really great way to look at the practice of yoga, and in particular the practices that we're about to talk to, but it can also be a little bit esoteric, and I'm more of a grounded person, so I like being able to match this up with a psychological concept that's been tested and proven time and time and time again, and saying, hey, look, these are really kind of 2 manifestations of the same set of ideas. So like I said, I hope the discussion on Maslow helped you guys see this a little bit more clearly. Limb 5 is Prada Yahara. This limb really represents that transition that we've been talking about from the physical practice, asana and pranayama, to a more mental practice. It's easier to make that switch if you are regularly practicing those first 4 limbs. Okay, it doesn't have to be at the same time, same day, same hour, nothing like that. Just that those first 4 limbs have become a regular part of what you do. Prada Yahara, we would describe, yoga defines it as learning to focus. In the Western world, we would sort of describe this more as sensory withdrawal or selective attention. Essentially what this means is that you're drawing awareness away from external and bringing it towards the internal. I like to think about this as the body settles down, or as your mind settles down, it is no longer as easily distracted by external or extraneous senses, perception, or thought. Kind of we are deciding what we want to pay attention to and what we can dismiss or ignore. And going back to the previous slide when I said you need to be attending to the first 4 limbs of yoga to really get this to work for you, think about it in more practical terms of your life. When you guys are sitting in class, think about on any given day how easy it is for you to focus on lecture. Okay? On a day when it's your first class of the day, you woke up on time, you got a decent night's sleep, you were able to eat breakfast, you didn't have any problems getting to campus or anything like that. It's easy for you to focus on what your professor, what your teacher is saying. On a day when maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep or your alarm didn't go off, you missed the bus, which meant you missed breakfast, and it's your 3rd class of the morning, what do you sit there thinking about? It's certainly not what the teacher is talking about. It's most likely, oh my God, this day has been such crap and I'm starving because I didn't have breakfast, or I've got a huge test that I was up late for the night before studying for and I don't know if I'm ready for it. You aren't able to focus. Okay? So again, while the definitions are a little bit esoteric and out there, I want you to always think back and try and put this in a practical sense for yourselves. So limbs 6 and 7, again, I group these together and I call these the mental practices. Limb 6 is dharana or focus. Focus is attention that is held on a single thought or object. So in other words, you're quieting everything else, physically and mentally, except for that one object that we call the object of your concentration. It's necessary to achieve focus before you can skip to limb 7. Limb 7 is dhyana or meditation. Meditation is a sense of sharp awareness, but without the focus. So it's interesting to me that you have to achieve the focus, and then you don't need the focus. It's an undisturbed flow of thought around that object of meditation. I like to think of it this way, and you'll hear it described a lot this way. Like if you Google this, it's kind of like that minute or two right before you fall asleep at night. You're conscious, you're aware that you're thinking, and you have a flow of thought that is usually related. One thought is related to the next, but there isn't any sort of input from you that's occurring. It just sort of happens. That's kind of what it's like. And this is why some of you guys might be struggling in Shavasana. It's hard to produce that much physical stillness without giving away to just sleep. You're trying to find that balancing point between the physical stillness and the mental clarity, again, without falling asleep. The reason that I lump these two together is because the difference between these two limbs is very subtle. The difference is if thought flows or not. Very often you'll hear people who, meditate regularly will talk about the fact that limb 6 is almost instantaneous for them. It's almost like it never happens. They reach their point of focus and then they're immediately into meditation. But again, the difference between these is if thought flows. So you can think about it, limb 6 would be as if the object of your meditation is a spoon. The only thing that you're focused on is that spoon. And that's it. Limb 7 would be you're still focused around the object of meditation. So in other words, you're still thinking about the spoon, but now you've got more wiggle room and you can think about, well, what color is the spoon? What shape? How does the shape change and vary? Now try to imagine that there is no spoon. That's the difference, okay? So again, that's sort of why I lump these two together, because you need one before the other, but the one is, in my mind, a little bit more simplistic and, again, instantaneous. Which brings us, finally, to Limb 8, Samadhi, which is enlightenment, and yoga will actually define it as self-actualization. Okay, so again, this is why I did the whole discussion about Maslow. In Limb 8, or enlightenment, the meditator merges with the object of meditation to transcend itself. Okay, so again, here's where we get a little bit out there. The idea is that there's a sense of oneness about the object of concentration, the focus, and the person meditating. Okay? Ideally, what's supposed to happen here is that there should be some sort of realization of interconnectedness, realization about the divine, or a realization about the meditator's own self. Again, people who meditate a lot, who've actually reached this limb, which is very difficult to do, this is where they'll talk about they had some sort of revelation about themselves or the world. Again, to bring it back to sort of practicality, someone who's seeing a therapist for something, this is what we would call a breakthrough. That they just all of a sudden were able to see something that they weren't able to see about themselves before. Okay? And this brings us to homework number 5. This is going to be a breath counting activity. We have done some work with observing our breath, so we're going to start taking that into the next couple of steps with this activity here. Find your quiet, comfy place, get yourself situated. Find your timer, set it for 5 minutes this time. Before you start your timer, bring your attention to your breath, at least for a handful of inhale-exhale cycles. Start the timer as soon as you're ready, and all I want you to do is count your breath in the following pattern. Count 1 on inhale, 2 on exhale, 3 on inhale, 4 on exhale, and repeat through the number 10. So your odd number should fall on inhales, your even number should fall on exhales. I want you to continue that cycle of 10 counts for the full 5 minutes. If you notice that your mind has wandered, if you notice that you've miscounted, what's most likely to happen is that you're going to get to 30 and be like, oh, whoops, what happened there? That's fine, no worries. Just bring your attention back to your breath, and on your next inhale, start over with 1. Okay, no big deal. Submit me a paragraph or 2 summarizing your experience. Okay, were you able to count? Did your mind wander? How much did it wander? Why do you think it's wandering? Again, all of those things that I'm asking you to sort of pay attention to. Okay? And at the end of your essay, if you can identify the movie reference that I gave in this lecture, you get a bonus point. All right, like I said, this is the only lecture for this week, so I will see you next time.